Well, hi, everyone. Hopefully you're in the right place. And thank you for filling out the polling questions that Carson had queued up there. They're still available, I believe. Questions around your Carnegie classification at your institution and the status of your institution as it relates to portfolio manager benchmarking. So it looks like so far there is a little bit of a trend towards doctorate granting institutions on the Carnegie classification side, and sort of an even mix across use of the tool, with more folks that are new to it, so or that have just some buildings. So that's good to see. That's what we like. We're trying to grow our program and get more institutions engaged. So that's great. So I'll mention up top really quickly before moving to the slides that later on we're going to have, like Carson said, a Q&A, and during that Q&A I'll be helped out by Andrew White and Sarah Dieck from Retic Advisors, and they're a firm that supports our work in the higher ed sector. Let me see here. Okay, I'm going to try. All right, so up top we have some objectives for the session today, as well as an agenda. We're going to hopefully explain key components of the ENERGY STAR strategy and how we work, review our shared goals for the higher education space. And when I say our, I'm assuming that organizations on the slide, on the presentation today, sort of have some similar goals that we have. Communicate what we see as key barriers to efficiency in the sector, and then discuss some tools and resources we've developed thus far to try and get over those barriers, as well as the key sort of thing today is talking about this new initiative we're launching called the ENERGY STAR Higher Education Benchmarking Initiative, or HEBI, and sort of lay that out, and then we'll do the Q&A session like I mentioned at the end. So this is a little bit redundant, but just to give you a sense of the agenda, a lot of it maps onto what I just talked about. We'll start with some background and context, talk about ENERGY STAR and what we've done so far in the space, and then really get into the HEBI and Q&A. And before we go any further, I just want to make sure everyone's clear on eligibility for the HEBI. This new initiative is really focused on 2- and 4-year degree granting institutions. And we initially said that it was open just to US institutions, but have since expanded to Canada. So if you're an organization that works with organizations like that, then we encourage you to figure out how you might be able to support them in participating. But it really is focused on colleges and universities in the United States and Canada. All right. So background and context. So for those of you who aren't super familiar with our program, ENERGY STAR, hopefully you've seen the label at least. We're a volunteer program that helps support energy efficiency, which then translates into climate change protection and saving money. And some of the main sort of tools in our toolbox are copied here. So the first thing we always seek in engaging new organizations is a leadership commitment. It's a partnership with ENERGY STAR, sort of at a high level of an organization that translates into a commitment to efficiency. So if your institution isn't already an ENERGY STAR partner, we encourage you to check that out. And as with all things, we're available to answer questions if you have them. The next sort of thing on our in our bailiwick are the tools and resources that we've developed over time to support organizations in improving efficiency. So the first one copied here is really the heart of our program on the commercial side, which is Energy Star Portfolio Manager. It's a free online tool that's secure and is available for any organization to use to track their energy use, water use, and waste and materials over time, to understand their performance and compare with similar buildings as well as against their own portfolio. So it's really the heart and soul of our program. But it doesn't stop there. So one of the other sort of components of the tool are our 1 to 100 Energy Star scores, which for energy use show, for some property types, not all property types, but for many property types, show how your energy performance sort of maps out on a 1 to 100 percentile scale for similar buildings. So we look at the type of property as well as operating characteristics and take those into account to give you a fair assessment of your performance that includes that business activity. And then the other sort of main part of our approach is our recognition for top performance. So we have Energy Star certification for buildings, which is available for properties scoring a 75 or higher on our 1 to 100 scale, and for most types of properties, and our Energy Star awards for organizations, which are looking at what an organization did sort of soup to nuts in the past year to advance efficiency. And with that, we're looking at not just savings, but also overall approach to energy management and also the communications that were done to advance efficiency within the institution and outside of it. So those are some of the main sort of components of our program here. And if you have any questions about them or interest in pursuing certification or Energy Star awards, then like I said, we're available to discuss those. So in terms of our shared goal that I referenced earlier, I really see that hopefully as a shared commitment to reducing energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. So this graphic here shows a larger study of Second Nature signatories. It's a little older, but I think shows probably what is a realistic sort of continuing breakdown of the amount of emissions for most institutions that connects back to building energy use versus other end uses. So this is really showing that for buildings, about 72% of emissions translate back to what the institution either generated or purchased for use in buildings. So at most institutions, that's the case, that it's at least half of emissions, and also a significant line item in operating costs. So this is sort of what we want to focus on. It's our big effort. Why is it that that all institutions aren't sort of perfect on efficiency? Well, we all know that there are a lot of challenges out there. This slide sort of covers some key ones that we've seen in the market. So starting with operational, we know that despite the broad interest in advancing efficiency and real progress that's happened over the last 10 to 15 years in reducing energy intensity, there are still some pretty big challenges, including, per the goals of GHG emission reduction spelled out specifically. So some of those are limited staff capacity, budget shortfalls, competing priorities where staff are spread thin or have a lot on their plate, and then deferred maintenance backlogs that stack up over time as institutions build more buildings and deal with a lot of other things sort of in priority order. So that's one set of challenges we've seen. And then another set is really around the data and benchmarking challenges. So at the heart of this is really, we have a few things with our program that make it difficult, namely that there isn't wholesale coverage of 1-to-100 ENERGY STAR scores for all property types on most college and university campuses. That doesn't mean there aren't any, but that incomplete coverage has made it a challenge to compare performance against peers. Another thing that's made it a challenge is a lack of building level metering on many higher ed campuses. So sort of a foundational element of our program is building level metering, because that's sort of the scale at which we encourage folks to track energy use and understand performance. Without that granularity, it can be pretty difficult to manage energy use and really understand where to prioritize investments, as well as to understand how your performance in your buildings compares sort of across campus and between institutions. The last thing here is setting an accurate peer group. So we've heard from a lot of institutions that they have unique characteristics, which is undoubtedly true. Higher ed institutions are sort of unique in a lot of ways individually. They have different types of buildings. They're focused on different forms of discourse. They have characteristics that make it difficult to compare, especially when you think about all the other things that can affect energy use from a base level, like the Carnegie classification or the climate zone or the percent of residential students. So creating an accurate peer group is really a big challenge. And all these challenges sort of translate into some of the tools and resources we've created, and hopefully connect back to the HEBI initiative that we're launching. Okay. So here I want to just quickly go through some of the tools and resources we've created so far on our higher education focus at ENERGY STAR. I've been in the role here for about 4 years, and during that time, we've really picked up our game, I hope, on colleges and university work and developed new tools. So go through some of this stuff here. Start off with a step away from the spreadsheet guide that we created last year in tandem with HE STARS, the GRITS platform, US Green Building Council, Second Nature, and UNH SciMap. And this is really around trying to provide clarity in the market on the landscape of online sustainability tracking tools and the different ways the different niches that they have and how they interconnect. So it's meant as a resource for people that are trying to move away from just using Excel spreadsheets to more sophisticated platforms and helping them navigate through the decisions and really reaching the end goal. So it's pretty agnostic as to where you end up. It's meant to provide clarity. It also shows later on trends in sustainability data management in the sector and provides a framework at the end for creating a data management roadmap, really moving away from spreadsheets for schools that are going in that route. Next, we have a short case study that highlights what Northwestern University did to earn our ENERGY STAR Partner of the Year Sustained Excellence Award. So they're the first institution to ever win, higher ed institution to ever, important distinction, the first higher ed institution to ever win the Sustained Excellence Award from us, which is, again, the organizational level awards that we do on an annual basis. And this really just looks at what helped them win. We encourage more institutions to apply, to look at it, and are available to answer any questions. But hopefully it provides a good sort of sense for what it takes. Next, we have our Energy Star certification guidelines for higher ed. This is a really short document that is meant to just clarify things, because there has been some confusion in the past around certification, in part because of the property type issue that I mentioned before, where not all property types on a higher ed campus are eligible for 1 to 100 scores. So if you're interested in pursuing certification, I encourage you to take a look. It's sort of a step-by-step list, and hopefully provides good direction. Next, we have a treasure map for student housing. So this is from a set of resources, a campaign that we ran last year called Energy Star Treasure Hunt. And that was meant as a collaborative, fun way for building occupants to sort of team up and walk through a building to understand opportunities for saving energy. And we have lists or maps for different property types that were developed in consultation with the sector to focus on key sources of possible opportunity. So a lot of it is branded also around pirates, so you can't miss with that. So we have a handful of resources that go through, running one of these treasure hunts, including how-to guides, an Excel worksheet for quantifying savings, and then some other sort of communications resources, as well as maps like the student housing one here. And in addition, we also have maps for offices, labs, and multifamily housing buildings if you have any apartment style housing on campus that has in-unit kitchens and bathrooms. Okay, and then last on our list of resources is one that's coming soon. So this is what we're calling an executive report, and it features HE STARS data. It's something that we wanted to put out, so it looks at campus level energy use intensity and maps that against different institutional characteristics commonly viewed as key drivers of energy use, like some of those I mentioned earlier: Carnegie classification, climate zone, percent residential, and percent energy intensive space. So I'm going to open up the hood a little bit and say sort of the high level takeaway is that we didn't see clear trends sort of in the mapping of intensity against these different characteristics. And our sort of takeaway there is that energy performance is really about energy management. So we're using this as a sort of a state of the market as well as short marketing piece for our program, including some how-to hit the ground running. So be on the lookout for that. Hopefully it's interesting to folks. Okay, so it's time to get into the main act here. Let's talk about the heavy. So this summer, we're launching a new opportunity for colleges and universities. It's meant to provide a new way for college universities to understand their campus building energy and water performance. Institutions that participate will receive a scorecard showing how their performance compares to peer institutions. So they'll see both sort of how they're performing and overall metrics for all participants in an anonymized format. And we hope that it sparks dialogue and action on energy and water efficiency. As I mentioned earlier, all 2- and 4-year colleges and universities are invited to participate. And a key thing is that participant data will be kept anonymous. So when we share back results, we'll be sharing one for your institution. So you'll see sort of, you'll know who you are. But then the folks that you're compared against you won't know specifically what institution they are. And I'll talk a little bit more about sort of how we're doing peer grouping. So you'll see both your results in the context of a peer group, as well as overall results for all participants. Okay. And I think I mentioned already, and I'll re-mention, Canadian institutions are also welcome now to participate. We relaxed our rules on that. So what will I get out of participating? EPA will provide each institution a scorecard, just like I mentioned before, as well as overall results. So we're hoping this provides insights into industry trends. So this first round of analysis that we're looking at will be for calendar year 2019 data, and we're hoping to have multiple rounds of scorecards, to include additional periods of performance and a few things there. So that could include, stuff next year, or when we collect next year for 2020 data, that could include some on the impacts of COVID-19, which, there's a lot to dig into there on sort of what can be said about performance in this era, but it hopefully will, give us a sense of sort of how institutions responded and sort of what could be realized in terms of savings and what could not. But that's one thing, and we're also hoping that that this sort of morphs into a survey effort. So if you aren't aware, all of our 1-100 Energy Star scores are developed through nationally representative surveys of different property types, and we use the data that comes out of them to model scores for those different property types. So we're hoping, since we don't have a ton of coverage in higher ed, that this group of participants could really be a rallying force behind the value of a 1-100 score for campuses. That would take a little bit of time, but it's something that we'd really like to see, since we know that advancing efficiency is a shared goal. Okay. And I'll mention here, I think I said it already, but the peer institutions that you'll be compared against are going to be on the basis of those institutional characteristics that we're collecting. So things like Carnegie classification and climate zone and percent residential on campus. Yeah, and this is a little bit of a give and take. We're always open to in future rounds to adapting and adding things that the industry finds valuable. So hopefully it will grow and become more helpful and driving of action over time. Okay, so just going to talk a little bit about the logistics of participating in the HEVI. So to participate, each institution will need to complete these steps by September 15th. So they'll need to submit campus level energy and water use data for calendar year 2019 through Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And that will be done through the use of a data request. And it's a really simple reporting process if you're not familiar. So basically you click on it and then you attach your buildings to it and send them to us. And I haven't mentioned this before, I guess, but water use data is optional. We're hoping that institutions care about water use and have the sort of capacity to send that along as well, so that they can get additional insights on how they stack up on water use. So that's step one, and then step two is filling out a questionnaire that should take 30 to 60 minutes at most and provides those institutional characteristics. If you have all of that stuff on hand, it probably would be closer to 30 minutes, but things like endowment size and FTE student enrollment and whatnot. So this deadline is one that we're putting out so that we can move forward with analysis and sharing back scorecards. But if the deadline isn't realistic, given we know that this is a pretty difficult time for, especially in higher ed, we were hoping that the window here later this summer was a good one for folks to potentially step away for a couple hours to submit 1 to 2 hours to submit data to us. But if that doesn't seem realistic, then please let us know and we can adjust. It just would mean sort of moving back sort of when you get the results. Okay. And in terms of the amount of time, we alluded to it there earlier, but if you're already benchmarking in Portfolio Manager, it probably will take 30 minutes to access the reporting template in the tool, and then another 30 or so minutes to respond to the questionnaire. So an hour or so. If you don't have all your buildings in the tool yet, but you do use the tool, use it some, might take additional half hour or so. And then if you've never used the tool, there's a little bit of a ramp up. We want the tool to be very user-friendly, but in reality, it takes just a little bit of work. And we have some training materials, and we'll try and boil those down to make it really clear, as clear as we can. And we're also available, but that might take another hour or so to really understand things. Okay. And I'll mention that, I guess I'll move on here. So in terms of what support we're offering, we have already a lot of resources for sort of getting started in the tool. We're working to package those up. So some of those are copied here if you want to get started now and sort of understand things if you're new to the tool, which we fully encourage. But we'll also be pulling together sort of the questionnaire and finalizing that and sending it out, as well as a how-to guide that will include sort of other things we think are key in terms of what gets included and excluded, very high level how to benchmark in the tool for this initiative. And I'll mention there that the two sort of main formats for sending data to us won't require a whole lot of extra work for folks that are already benchmarking in the tool. And if you're new to the tool, hopefully it's a fairly simple exercise. But all that's to say that we're working on finalizing those materials and making sure that they really help you in participating and are available for questions as well. So with that, I think we're going to move into some